listening to Over the Oxer podcast with Tracey Cole for all things to do with the mind for equestrians. So this week I am really delighted to welcome Louise Tayler, and Louise is an ADHD business coach, and she specialises in helping business owners who know exactly what they need to do, but because they have ADHD, they can't make themselves do it. And she comes from a sales and marketing background originally, but now she's blended that with her ADHD-informed mindset coaching to help clients build fun and sustainable businesses. I love the fun bit. Welcome, Louise. It's lovely to see you again.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's great to see you. I haven't seen you for ages, so it's
I
lovely to
know,
have
right?
a chat.
Where has all that time gone, eh?
So for people who don't know you, then can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to specialise in ADHD?
Okay, so it's always hard to know, like, how far back do I go? Because if I was going to go all the way back to, my first kind of entry into like the business world, we could go all the way back to the 80s when my mum was an Avon lady and she had all the makeup and all the sort of sample boxes, and she didn't do anything with it, but I sold it to all of my friends. So I've always been, and I didn't sell it for money, I just because it was fun. So I've always been that kind of person who's always interested in sort of talking to people, products and selling things. I think it's just comes from being a naturally outgoing person. So obviously I went through my career, didn't do great at school, obviously. And when I left school, the only real option available to me was to get a job in sales. And then cut to having children. And I decided to set up my own business. And I actually worked as a children's yoga teacher, which I loved. I did that for about 10 years. And again, I could lean into all those sales skills that I learned as a salesperson. But then as I started to get to my early 40s and perimenopause started kicking in, everything started to feel a lot harder. I came to you when I was in a really hard part of my life. I had quite young children. I knew I couldn't be doing yoga teaching for like 3-year-olds for very much longer. I was getting a bit old and everything was getting a bit creaky, and I needed to transition to something different. But I did my NLP course. I love my NLP course, but I just really struggled to do anything with it. I really struggled to, everyone says you need to pick a niche. I really struggled to do that. I was flip-flopping around and changing my ideas every single different week. I was having all these amazing ideas. And I had this great mindset so that I really believed that I could do it. But when it came to actually executing and actually doing something with all this knowledge that I had worked so hard for and paid so much money for, I was just banging my head against a brick wall. And at the same time, I had a young daughter who was having a really, really, really hard time at school. Lots of big emotional explosions, really, really struggling with friendship groups, all of those kind of things. And long story short, somebody suggested that she might have ADHD. And I was completely surprised. It was literally the last thing on my mind. I had never really even heard of it. I hadn't even explored it at all. But then, of course, there's probably people listening to this that are nodding away because this happens to so many of us. When we start reading through the questionnaire of all these different behavioral traits, I was just ticking everything. I was like, yeah, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. So obviously we had her diagnosed, and then at the same time I was diagnosed. And it was like, it's really hard to overstate this, right? Because it sounds like a cliche. It's like all the lights went on. I was like, oh my God, this is why. Whereas before I thought it was because I was lazy, stupid, couldn't get my act together, all of those things that I had been telling myself. I knew that it was this condition that had been like lurking around in the background all my life that had basically been making everything so much harder for me. And obviously I got the diagnosis, got the treatment. I mean, I make it sound very, very quick. It took ages, right? But then when I started really working on all of the things, all the interventions that I teach in my coaching, everything changed. It changed for me and it changed for my daughter as well. And so, yeah, this is why it's such a passion of mine to work with business owners, particularly female business owners, because for a lot of us, particularly if we have neurodivergent children, self-employment really is the only viable option. If I had been trying to get to work every day while she was throwing chairs across classrooms, it just would never have worked. It was a horrible, horrible time, and it would have been made so much worse if I'd been trying to get into an office every day. So, yeah, I think working with female business owners with ADHD is such a passion of mine, because there is so much that we can do in the day to day with organization, time management, all of these things, and mindset that it can be like night and day. So you can go from struggling, flailing around, not knowing what to do, to actually having a pretty successful business. And I love that phrase that a rising tide lifts all the boats. So once your business starts to work, you have some more money, you have some more self-confidence, your energy improves. It's just, yeah, very, very rewarding. And that's a very, very long answer.
No, that was great. That was great, because I knew some of that, but I didn't know all of it. And it's really interesting to know where people have come from and how late you were diagnosed. You weren't diagnosed as a teenager or anything like that. So when we talk about ADHD, I think like most people have an idea of what it is, and they're thinking of the stereotypical, probably boy actually in school rather than a girl. And we're thinking about the lad that just can't sit still, and like you say, is flicking things around the classroom and causing a disruption. But there's a lot of ADHD descriptions that are far removed from that stereotype, aren't there? Can you tell us a little bit about it? I know that it's sort of like it isn't a one size fits all kind of thing either, is it?
Yeah. So traditionally you have three different types of ADHD. You have your hyperactive ADHD, which is your like naughty little boy. We call it this sit down and shut up syndrome, right? The sort of the difficult child. You also have the inattentive ADHD, which is commonly seen in girls, not always. You can have hyperactive girls. I'm a hyperactive girl, and you can have inattentive boys as well. But commonly it is seen in girls. That inattentive ADHD looks like, the easiest way to describe it is like they're underwater. They're kind of far away from everybody. You will see them kind of twirling their hair, staring out the window, looking a little bit vacant. That is why it is so common for girls to be misdiagnosed. Because what happens is, as they get older, that the lack of diagnosis, we will see things like anxiety, eating disorders, self-medicating, so alcohol and drugs and things like that, because everybody thinks everyone's attention is on the hyperactive boy, the one that's running around the playground and things like that. So in a way, somebody like my daughter, who is a hyperactive ADHD child, they're kind of the lucky ones because they get spotted really, really quickly. It's the inattentive kids and adults that can actually have a really hard time because it's much harder for them to be diagnosed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said there was three, didn't I? So there's inattentive, there's hyperactive, and then you've got combined, which is a bit of both.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So now I can see why there's this kind of spectrum of behaviours, and that people describe themselves differently. And if they look down a tick list, they don't necessarily have all the conditions and issues that are listed. So what is happening then? I know, again, I'm going to say ADHD brain, but there isn't really a single ADHD brain, as you just said. But what's happening when that person tries to focus or they try to get motivated? What's the struggle?
Focus, first of all. So the idea that we have a deficit of attention is actually a misnomer. Problem is we have too much attention.
Yeah.
Everything's interesting. As I was having all these different ideas for my business, I was flip-flopping around and couldn't choose one thing. That is a typical I was finding all these subjects interesting, and I couldn't constrain to just one thing. So when we are struggling to focus, we could be annoyed. You could be having a conversation, a really interesting conversation with you here. And then I can hear someone like with a strimmer out in the next garden. And then my brain instantly goes over there and I start worrying about, oh, can that come up on the audio or any of those kind of things. So it just makes it much harder for me to regulate my attention. And what was the other question?
And the motivation, is that a difficulty as well, to get motivated in what you need to be motivated in rather than this array of things?
Hey, this is not my idea, all these different lovely things that we could be doing. So yeah, what we're talking about is dopamine and a deficiency in dopamine. Dopamine it gets a bit of a bad rap, right? We always assume dopamine with like gambling and sex and drugs and all that kind of stuff. But actually, dopamine is just the anticipation of a reward. Okay. And that's what, when we were living around, we were living in caves and gathering around fires. It was the dopamine that would get us up and going to hunt and look for food and things like that. So when we are struggling with motivation, it's because our dopamine is really, really low, which is why you can find it really difficult to do something important but boring. So we're getting to the time of year when everyone's going to be doing their tax returns and they'll be looking at their tax returns thinking, why, what is wrong with me? Why can I not do this? Even though they know they're going to get a fine, even though they're making it hard for themselves, it's because there is zero dopamine in that particular task, which is why you might find you go on island and buy shoes or something like that when you're supposed to be doing something really, really important. And that is the issue with motivation.
Okay, so what about emotional regulation? Is that a difficulty as well? Things like anxiety or performance anxiety or, those kind of things when people are under pressure. Is that difficult to regulate? Are people a bit up and down with that, generally speaking?
Yeah, that's a really good question because funnily enough, the emotional regulation piece actually isn't in the diagnostic criteria because it's you can't measure it.
Yeah.
Right. What might be an overreaction to you, I might see it and think that's, perfectly reasonable reaction. But the ability to regulate emotions is what we call an executive function, which is that part you obviously know about that. It's the part of your brain that helps you do what you intend to do, what you set out to do. And yeah, so it can be when we get very angry, what happens is we will flash up and get very, very angry, and then we will have a really hard time moving on from that anger. And then if you want to throw impulsivity in the mix, which is another one of the problems, that so we have a hard time managing our impulsivity. So when we get debated, you could call that anger. And then you put in a bit of impulsivity, that's when we will do stuff like hit someone or fire off an angry email or shout at our kids or something like that. And then you will have the down regulating when you come down from that period of stress, and then you get really upset with yourself and you feel terrible for the way that you behave. So it can be constantly living on this roller coaster. And the same goes for good things as well, right? We can get really, really overexcited. Overexcited and go to a party, and then all of a sudden you've done 5 shots and you don't know what you're doing because you're in that state of excitement and you are taking action from that very, very activated state. And one of the things I love teaching people and working with people is helping them learn how to manage and regulate your emotions. And that is when we use something called a steer map, where the first job is to stop and notice, like, okay, I'm really overexcited. I'm probably going to drive too fast to the party, or I'm really angry. Now is not the time to make this phone call. Yeah. So it's learning how to stop and then allowing the time for your emotions to come down, because they will come down, and then redirecting yourself and thinking so that you're in a position to respond rather than react. We're not just going around life reacting and setting fires left, right, and center. And it's actually helping people learn that we do have a lot of control, but it is a skill. It's a learnable skill. It's not something that will come naturally.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people obviously who are listening are equestrians and they ride. I know some people listen and they don't ride, but some people who ride or I suppose anyone who interacts with a horse, that dysregulation of your emotions, the incredible highs and incredible lows and so on, that the horses are going to pick up on that, aren't they? So it would be nice if people could find these ways to be a little bit more stable in their emotions, not to get rid of the emotions because we need them, but to not have that tremendous high and tremendous low at the same time.
There's so much that you can do, particularly with horses or with animals, is that co-regulation piece, bringing yourself back into the moment, putting your hand on their neck, feeling the warmth, feeling the hair on that, feeling the fur. Would you say fur or hair on a horse?
Yeah, either. Yeah,
And listen to them breathing and changing your breathing. So again, it's taking you out of that very activated part of your brain and lowering your fight or flight response. So yes, you're absolutely right. These emotions are really important. We need things like fear, particularly when we're riding a horse, to know that something's a good idea or a bad idea. But again, it's just getting to grips that these emotions don't run you. You have more control than we might always think we do, but it's a skill.
That's really interesting what you were saying about, stroking the horses and so on. A lot of people who have ADHD, diagnosed ADHD, and they are around horses, either they work with them or it's their hobby, they do report feeling much calmer around the horses. And I often wondered, was that just because the horses are kind of calm in themselves? Were they particularly working with calm horses? But that makes a lot of sense now, that they have that co-regulation with humans. And so they're really good actually for ADHD people, aren't they, to be around?
Yeah, and I think also as well, some of the things that you do with horses, like mucking that stable, cleaning tack, all that kind of, we call it heavy work,
Yeah,
is actually really good for I can say the word proprioceptive brain,
yeah,
which basically means it's getting out of your head into your body. A lot of us there's a lot of chaos and noise in our head. And when you're sort of digging or you're doing something heavy with your body, it's actually extremely soothing and very calming. And I think as well, there is something beautifully simple about knowing that you need to tack up a horse, you need to feed the horse, you need to get on the horse, you need to ride the horse. It's always the same.
yeah,
There's not a huge amount of grey area. You have to think, oh, do I put this tack or that tack or this? Do I feed it this or that? It's like that
yeah,
simplicity is really helpful. And I think when we're talking about something like, if you're talking about business, for example, that simplicity, keeping things really, really simple, can actually be incredibly therapeutic. So that you're not always trying to figure out what the next thing to do is. You just know exactly what the next steps are to take.
And if then I was thinking, if you know somebody who has ADHD or they suspect they have ADHD, how is it good? What's the best practice to support them?
I think learning about it yourself. I think
Yeah.
if we're talking about a loved one or if we're talking about somebody that you might work with or something like that, I love the analogy called it's NIFT. So is it no, acronym? So we learn to lift. So L stands for learn about that condition. You can just listen to this podcast or go on TikTok or Instagram or whatever and just get a quick idea of about the condition itself, aside from all the cliches that are about. Um, And then, so you look at the condition, you lift, you, yeah, you work about how it affects the individual.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's different for everybody. So look at how it affects that particular individual. You find accommodations. So when we're talking about accommodations, we're looking at simple. If we're talking about someone that you might work with or a colleague or something like that, find out how they like to communicate. They might they might prefer emails. They might prefer a phone call. That's what you call accommodations. Then you test accommodation. And when we're talking about an accommodation, we test the accommodation. We don't test the person. They say, we're going to communicate this week. And then you try that out. And how do you know it's working? If you decide after a week it's not working, it's not because that individual has failed. It's because the accommodation wasn't right.
Okay. Okay. That's really helpful. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And what would you like people to understand about ADHD?
I think that if you have somebody in your life who has ADHD, trust me, no one is more frustrated about it than they are.
Oh,
The
God.
things that are annoying you, trust me, they are feeling it 10 times more than you are. Whoops, got my headphone. So finding that empathy with that individual and know that they really are trying their best, because it goes a really long way. It goes a really, really long way. Having someone who is happy to give you the benefit of the doubt, who will help you talk things through, and who can see that you are really trying it's yeah, it can't be overstated. It's brilliant.
Mm. How important do you think mindset is when it comes to working with ADHD people? I know you work with the business coaching side of things. So how important is it for you that you bring mindset in to help the ADHD people?
I think it's really important, because a first part of any kind of change and growth is believing that it's possible. And I think particularly the work that I did with you with the NLP was so helpful in knowing that we can change, and that this year can be better than last year, and this week can be better than last week, and we're all work in progress, no matter how old we are.
Yeah.
But I would say that it is really important to know that mindset alone, particularly with ADHD, is, if you only try and do mindset, you might find it difficult to keep going, because strategies are really important. If I think, as I was explaining earlier, when I sort of set up my business, I had all the mindset, but none of the strategy. And I just felt like I was just banging my head against a brick wall all the time. So if you can bring both in together, in
Yeah.
terms of you've got your mindset and you've got your time management and your emotional regulation techniques and all of those things, then, forget about it. You'll be unstoppable.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So being unstoppable, what strengths do ADHD people have, do you think?
What have you got? I think you only need to look back in history or look around the people that we have in our society today. Richard Branson, Stephen Bartley, some people, I don't know how you would prove this, but some people say Einstein had ADHD. There is so much evidence in history that people with neurodivergent brains are extremely capable. And we have depth of creativity and knowledge and the ability to notice patterns.
Yeah.
Particularly people with ADHD make brilliant first responders. And this probably really works well in the equestrian environment, because we are very good at reacting to situations, particularly an emergency, because weirdly, it's kind of weirdly soothing when it's like all systems go, we've got a problem. You want somebody with ADHD in that room, because they will be able to cut straight through the noise and be able to actually solve the problem. When everyone else is running away from the danger, ADHDers are running towards it. So yeah, because none of this has anything to do with intelligence. People can, neurodivergent people can be, not all of us, we're not all geniuses, but you know what I mean? It has nothing to do with it. You could be the smartest person in the room who can never find your keys and can't remember where you could park your car, right? It has nothing to do with that. So there are lots and lots of strengths, but sometimes it can be difficult to unearth them because it's behind this like wall of fog,
Yeah.
which you'll find a lot of people will say things like, I know I'm capable of more, but I just can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't understand why I can't get it together. It's like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
And it's like you were saying, they know what to do. They don't need to be coached into what to do or what would be best to be done. But this, like you say, this block, this fog that's in front of them that just stops them from doing it, which must be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. And I think particularly when we're talking about trying to do anything on your own, a lot of us are verbal processors. So we need to talk it through with somebody. So if you're sitting on your own at a desk, not knowing where to start and what to do next, things like finding someone to talk to about it is really, really helpful. Not just a coach. If you can't afford a coach, that's fine. Like find a patient partner or a good friend who you can like talk it through with. And also like brain dumping. writing notes is incredibly helpful because it just gets the noise out of your head and down onto some paper so you can figure out what needs to be done next.
Yeah. What do you suggest somebody does if they suspect that they have ADHD? So they think that they've got all these different symptoms. What's the process for diagnosis? Because it's quite long-winded, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, I would definitely say get on the diagnosis pathway. It's different for different areas. So just because you read in the papers that it's 7 years, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the case in your area. So number one, talk to your GP. Again, that could be something that maybe you might want somebody to hold you accountable to that, because it's so easy just to be like, oh, I'll do it later, I'll do it later. So I would say that's definitely a really good place to start. But also there are lots and lots of lifestyle things that we can do that will really, really improve your ADHD. For example, exercise. Physical movement is proven to be as effective as medication. Yeah, for calming your brain, and it obviously increases endorphins, it helps regulate dopamine, it's all of those stuff. Having said that, if you are somebody who is struggling to get off the sofa, it's kind of unfair to expect them to get up and go for a run around the block. Do you know what I mean? But if you can just put your shoes on and go for a walk, that will help that will do something. So try not to do nothing, whatever you can do. Alcohol is like kryptonite. So cut down your alcohol if possible, completely reduce it. Keep your life as simple as possible. And that is mental clutter. So all the things that you need to do, like if you're walking your neighbour's dog, stop doing that. If you are adding loads and loads of stuff into your life that doesn't necessarily need to be there, cut as much of that stuff out as you can. And then also physical clutter as well. One handbag, one wallet, like things like that you'll find some people will be listening to think, I remember I decluttered my wardrobe and it felt amazing.
Yeah.
And that's because it's so soothing for your brain. So all these little interventions you can do, which are hugely helpful. And also, be really kind to yourself, like lean into it, because it's not a character flaw. It's a way of being. And there is lots and lots you can do without a diagnosis to be able to feel better incrementally, day by day. Because really and truly, diagnosis is it's just a piece of paper from the doctor, right? It doesn't really change anything. When you can actually lean into it and learn what works for you and find someone who you can talk to about it, it goes a really, really long way.
Yeah. Yeah. That self-compassion as well, like you're saying, that's so incredibly important, isn't it? That people don't beat themselves up because they're not doing the same as somebody else in their household or some co-worker, or they're not thinking the same, and they're getting frustrated. And just being aware that even if you're not diagnosed, like you say, you could possibly have ADHD, and this is where your brain just functions differently.
100%. And it's also worth saying that there is support that you can access without a diagnosis. For example, access to work, which is the government funded support that we can get, which will help pay for equipment. It will also help pay for coaching.
Yeah.
And you do not have to have a formal diagnosis for that. All you need to be able to do is demonstrate that you are struggling with ADHD symptoms. So there is a huge amount that you can do while we're waiting. So again, when we're talking about mindset, focus on what you can do, because there's tons. It's very easy to focus on the thing that's hard, like the diagnosis. Oh, I've got to wait for ages, so I might as well just sit around and not change. There is loads you can do in the meantime.
Yeah. And of course, people can look you up as well. So where can people find you on the internet and on socials? How can they contact you?
Okay, so my website is understanding-adhd.co.uk. You can contact me through there, or you can find me on Instagram, which is Louise_ADHD_coach. We're going to have show notes, Tracey, because I'm not
Yes,
100%
we are.
sure that's right. Something about ADHD and Louise. No, it's if you put the link in the show notes and it will be there. And I'm very happy to answer any questions. If anyone has any questions about access to work or working with me or anything like that, no obligation, just pop me an email and I'd be happy to help.
Super. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. The last thing was that you had a little follow-through formula as well, which is a free 5-day course, isn't it, as well? that you've
Yes.
offered. Tell us
Yes.
about that one.
Okay, so it is a 5-day course. You will get an email every day for 5 days, and it is designed to help you move out of procrastination into action. It breaks down all the key strategies, the 5 key strategies that we would use in coaching. So you can have a way of learning these skills and practicing them. And ideally, you want like one thing that you're trying to achieve. So maybe I'm trying to think what an equestrian would need if you were trying to, I don't know, you were trying to get a jump. That is that
Yeah.
how you would say it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
if there
could
was a
do
jump that
that.
you were trying to master, or there
Yeah.
was a particular horse that you're struggling with, or something
Yeah.
like that, and you want to say by the end of 5 weeks or 5 days, you want to have this thing done. The
Yeah.
follow through formula will help you. It will break it down so you can take it step by step every day. And at the end of the 5-day course, you will have a result.
Hey, I like it. Is that on your website?
Yes. And again, if you DM me on Instagram and I can send it through to you.
Okay, lovely. I will do, and I'll put that in the description box in the show notes. Thank you so much. That has been so interesting and so informative as well. I love what you do. It is absolutely brilliant. And I would always tell people who've got ADHD to head towards Louise.
Oh, thank you so much. It was great to see you. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great.